Okay, so let's hop right into this. I don't want this slideshow to be very long. It's only roughly 5 slides long, and I really don't want to waste your guys' time. I want you guys to get right into this. So without further ado, let's talk about this International Phonetic Alphabet. It's a very brief, very quick introduction, and then also a little bit more on vowels. So this is our bread and butter. Understanding the IPA, understanding Pratt, and us being able to extract those sounds where you're actually producing those sounds in your mouth. So first and foremost, I want you guys to take away everything that you've basically understood about English as you have read it on paper, and pay as close attention as possible to the sounds that people are using around you. You will notice that people aren't actually using the sounds that we use that correspond to the letters that we use in the English language. We most oftentimes drift off into using a different sound. For example, the word water. It's spelled W-A-T-E-R, but we don't say water, we say water. We use a D sound. In one of my other Mr. Speechy videos, I talk about the word Petey. Sometimes we call somebody that name Petey, and it's spelled with P-E, or it's spelled P-E-T-E, and we don't say PT, instead we say Petey. Again, do your best to adjust your mind to how people are using their sounds in conversation, even when they're reading, and notice how often they drift away from those letters that we see confronting us on that page. Most oftentimes, clients that I have don't understand this. Sometimes whenever I'm working with a kid and a parent's right there, and let's say I have a name Betty that's on our page, they see the double T and they end up saying, oh, so-and-so say Betty. And it's kind of embarrassing, but sometimes I have to correct the parents right in front of the kids saying, actually, we say the D. So let's move over and let's adjust that word to saying Betty. So again, this is the third time I'm saying this. I wanted to really reinforce this with you guys. I really do. Pay attention to those sounds. And then, of course, on that second bullet point, the IPA will help guide your understanding of the sounds used in general American English. So general American English is the accent that typical news anchors have. Whenever you are listening to a news anchor on CNN, Fox News, OAN, whatever it may be, your local news channel, most oftentimes they will have a general American English, and that is what is most oftentimes pursued for those large networks. Okay, so this right here on the left side, I will circle it in black, are the IPA letters that we use in English. Now, there are a couple here that I would actually say to ignore, but for the sake of having this slide right in front of us, these are the majority of the sounds that we use in English. Now, this sound right here, I'm going to circle it in green. These two are the same sound. If you look over here off to the right, you'll notice that the vowel that they're targeting is the E sound. So C, N, E. One has the stress, the other doesn't have the stress. And it's at this point, whenever we're talking about stress, intonation, whatever, or what have you, those are the suprasegmentals. Those are the things that we focus on later on down the road when your vowels are established. Most oftentimes, as you may have heard me say before, most accent modification specialists focus on the suprasegmentals first instead of the vowels first. And in my opinion, I think they've got the order opposite, or they're actually neglecting one component of actually maintaining or obtaining a good general American English accent, that being the vowels themselves. So here in this list, you have the E right here, and then the E sound right here, 2 times. So this list really is a little bit longer than it actually should be. There are a couple of sounds on here that I actually wouldn't consider to be a core unit or even necessary for you to pay attention to. And I'll talk about that a little bit more on another slide or another part or phase in this course, but really quickly, this sound right here, I'm going to circle it in purple. This is called the schwa, and this is called the wedge. These are the same sound, but one is stressed, the other is unstressed. You have this sound right here. I'm going to circle it again in purple. That's the backward C. And then you also have this sound right here. It kind of looks like an A. And if you go over off to the right, you have the word saw and then the word arm. Okay, there's a very fine difference between the two. There certainly is a difference, but it's very fine. And most oftentimes, these two sounds are conflated with each other. Hence, we really won't be paying attention too much to this backward C sound. If you are able to develop this sound right here, it certainly will pour into your ability to produce this sound more accurately, this being the backward C. So this is the IPA. Feel free to come back to this slide to reference, hey, what exactly does this symbol mean? What sound does this symbol produce? What sound does this symbol down here produce? So yeah, the other thing I want to point out here is unrounded versus rounded. We have a rounded lip and then a unrounded lip. The unrounded lip produces these vowels. Ah, I. Rounded produces these vowels. U, O. The other thing I want to point out is the frontness and then back. You have a near front, central. These are where these vowels are produced in your mouth. And on the next slide, or I think the following slide, you will see, and even on the previous slide, you would have noticed that there are certain sounds like this E that are produced a little bit further forward, frontward in your mouth. You have this oo that is produced further back in your mouth, hence why they have the back and front categories right here. Rounded, unrounded, we talked about that. And then close, open, mid, this is just merely talking about how much your mouth is open. So your mouth will be open whenever you're making that ah sound, or ah sound. Your mouth is going to be a lot more open. Your mouth is going to be more closed whenever you're producing the ee sound. Okay, so I'm not really going to reference frontness, closeness, or even rounding all that much. It's a very important component, but what I want you to do is primarily focus on these sounds and understanding, okay, these are the sounds that I'm listening to, and let me see how I'm going to be able to produce it nicely. And I also do think that most of these sounds are a little bit more common sense than what we give the average speaker. Most speakers understand whenever I'm making the oo sound, I'm not going to open up my mouth. In fact, ooh, it's extremely hard to be able to make that oo sound while maintaining an unrounded mouth position. So with that being said, keep these categories in mind. I may reference them in the future here and there, but it's not going to be a primary thing that we are going to talk about or even develop. I do expect this to just come naturally for you. If it doesn't come naturally for you, if you're having a hard time with the E sound, if you're having a hard time with the ah sound, oo sound, then by all means come back to this slide and try to figure out, okay, am I actually rounding? Is the middle portion of my tongue actually near back? Is the closeness of my mouth really near close, or is it a little bit more open? So yeah, let's go on to this next slide. And then there are diphthongs. So these are still considered vowels. Excuse me. These are still considered vowels, but they are a special vowel. It's almost as though you have two different vowels meshing into one. So for example, you have I, ow, ow, ow. That's a diphthong. You will notice right here that you have A and O. And the phoneme, at least as far as how they're categorizing it, phoneme just means a sound. Okay, whenever you see this word phoneme, it just means sound. The way that they're depicting this sound, A, is just with the E. But if you really want to break it down, you would actually see two different vowels in it. It would be the A. It would be this symbol right here. We will not be touching the diphthongs only because, as you will see, I'll just draw it out right now, as you are targeting these four areas in your vowel space, these four corners will influence how you are producing these diphthongs. If these four corners are off, most likely your diphthong will be off. If these four corners are right, or a little bit more towards that general American English, then these diphthongs will also follow suit. So diphthongs are important, and I just noticed that this whole slide is looking really messy. Diphthongs are important, but what is even more important is addressing these four corner sounds, which we will get into in the very near future. So what I want you to pay attention to is this middle portion right here. This is where you are making those vowels. It's not merely with the tip of the tongue. It's not with the back of the tongue. It's primarily with this middle portion of your tongue. There are some dialects, there are some languages where the tip of the tongue actually matters a lot for your vowels. But in general American English, it doesn't play a very large part, if any part, in producing any of the vowels. It's primarily happening right here. So as you are going through this course, as you are learning how to develop a certain sound, whichever sound you are going to target first, you will notice and you will have to be able to be as sensitive as possible to this middle portion of your tongue. Okay, this is where the vowels are being produced. Also, the other thing I want you to pay attention to is the vowel duration. Okay, the vowel duration affects how high your tongue is going to be. The vowel duration affects how low that tongue may go. Sometimes whenever you have, and I'll address this again in a later slide, but whenever you have a preceding sound, for example, let's say T, right before this E sound, T, this T might affect the placement of this E sound. That's called co-articulation. Now, what you want to be able to do is not allow these preceding sounds or sounds that follow after this vowel to really affect your ability to produce this E sound. You want to be as strict as possible in producing this E sound and getting that area as correct as possible. Only because you want to be able to really differentiate between this E sound and then this is sound that's hidden right in there. Last thing I want to touch on, and this is kind of a bonus, me being a speech language pathologist, I know a goodly amount about our mouth, and what I want you guys to walk away with is to not be a mouth breather. Close your mouth as much as you can. Get this tongue up right here. Get this entire tongue up right here on this hard part, even a little bit on the soft part of your palate. This is where your tongue should be resting whenever you're not talking. You should be breathing out of your nose majority of the time, and your tongue should be right up here. This is a good resting mouth position. This is going to help you out in sundry different ways that I'm not going to go into, but let me just give you this one tip. It is very important that you have that, and I also affirm that this will also help you in your ability to produce solid vowels. And if you do this consistently for years, you will have a very nice facial structure as well. Again, I won't go into that right now. This is just kind of a little bonus of you having me as being your speech language pathologist and accent modification specialist. Okay, so finally, let's get to work. Let's go ahead and download Pratt. You can follow this link right here, or you could just wait and listen to the next module, and you will see me type in Pratt. Please reach out to me if there's anything that's a little bit muddy about what I've said. I want you to be able to follow along as best as possible. Ultimately, what I want you to do is get to this place. Keep in mind everything that I said in this slideshow, but it's not very important. Over time, as you follow me, as we progress each step by step, everything will start to make a little bit more sense. If by the time we start practicing our vowels and we're drilling the vowels and things are not making sense, then absolutely reach out to me before you start practicing your vowels. All right, guys, see you in the next module.